The pen shook in Eli Turner's hand as he signed the paper. 2 slow strokes that transferred a forgotten cafe and 1,000 doubts into his name. $2. That was the price of his next chance. Not much more than a cup of coffee, yet the sum carried the weight of a promise whispered beside a hospital bed 2 years ago. Don't let the dream die with me. The notary barely looked up when Eli slid the bills across the counter. He could almost hear Lydia's voice, soft and steady, the one that used to cut through his worst days. But the room was quiet now, just the hum of the flickering light and the faint sound of gulls through the window. Outside, the wind bit against his coat as he faced the building. The old Seaside Café sagged like an exhausted body, its paint flaking, its sign barely legible. The Breakwater. A cruel name, maybe, for a place that had spent years breaking under storms. A man walking his dog paused nearby, muttering, "Guess Turner's lost it," before moving on. Eli pretended not to hear. He stepped inside, brushing aside cobwebs, the smell of salt and rot heavy in the air. The floor creaked beneath him, and a puff of feathers floated from a broken beam. Seagulls had claimed the rafters long before he did. He grabbed a broom left in the corner and began sweeping. The dust rose like ghosts, settling on his boots, his sleeves, his thoughts. He swept harder, faster, until his chest burned. He imagined Lydia standing in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, her laughter softening the edges of the work. "One day we'll open a place where no one eats alone," she had said. He'd promised her he would. But back then he didn't understand how heavy a promise could become when the other voice was gone. By afternoon, townspeople had gathered on the boardwalk, pretending to pass by. Some chuckled openly. $2 for a lifetime of regret, one man called. Another laughed. Turner's Folly. The words landed sharp but familiar. He'd been called worse since Lydia died. Dreamer, widower, lost cause. June would be home from school soon, and he didn't want her to see him rattled. He kept sweeping, pushing the feathers and laughter out the door. When the sun dipped, the light spilled through the cracked windows and hit the counter, revealing faint scratches in the wood. Old names carved by hands long gone. He ran his fingers over them, feeling the grooves, the small proof that someone once believed this place mattered. "We'll make it matter again," he said aloud, the sound startling him. Eli locked up just as the harbor bells rang 6. Behind him, the cafe stood battered but upright, like a man refusing to bow. He turned toward the pier, sea wind lifting the tired weight from his shoulders for a moment. Tomorrow he would bring June to see it. Tomorrow he'd start again. If you believe in second chances and want to see how this story unfolds, make sure to subscribe and follow along as Eli rebuilds more than just a cafe. The voicemail began with a click, a breath in her voice, soft, lilting, alive. "Hey, Eli, just thinking about that little cafe down by the pier. One day we'll open a place where no one eats alone." The words filled the quiet kitchen like sunlight finding its way through clouds. Eli froze, thumb hovering over the phone as if touching it could reach through time. He shouldn't have played it again. He'd promised himself to stop. But tonight, after scrubbing a day's worth of grime from the cafe walls, the silence felt heavier than the salt air pressing against the window. He sat at the small table where June's homework was spread out. The girl had fallen asleep on the couch, her pencil still tucked behind her ear. The old heater clicked and wheezed. Eli's hands were raw from cleaning, the skin cracked at the knuckles. He stared at them, the same hands that once held Lydia's as she talked about colors for the cafe walls, the smell of cinnamon rolls, the sound of strangers laughing together. "A place where no one eats alone," he whispered, the phrase rolling out like a vow. Outside, the tide was coming in, waves brushing against the rocks below the cafe's back deck. He could hear it faintly even from here. Lydia loved that sound, said it reminded her that everything keeps moving even when we can't. Eli reached for his wallet and pulled out a photo, Lydia in her apron, flower on her cheek, smiling without trying. He set it on the table beside the phone and pressed play again. The second time, the message hit differently. Her voice wasn't a wound, it was a direction. The words didn't just ache. They called him to finish what she couldn't. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and breathed slow. The cafe wasn't just a building. It was her unfinished sentence, and he was the one left to complete it. A knock came at the door. Cal Rivera, the fisherman from 2 doors down, stood there holding a crate of day-old bread. "Figured you could use this," Cal said. "It ain't pretty, but it's edible." Eli nodded, surprised. "Thanks, Cal." The man shrugged. "Heard you're fixing up the old cafe. Folks think you're crazy. I think maybe you just need something to build on." After Cal left, Eli sliced a piece of bread, toasted it on the gas stove, and sat beside June. He could almost hear Lydia teasing him. Bread before sleep, always. He smiled for the first time in weeks. The smell of toast filled the room, blending with the hum of the sea. He glanced toward the dark window where the cafe's outline sat under the moonlight. Tomorrow he'd start replacing the windows, then the floors, then the heart of it all. The kitchen Lydia dreamed of. He picked up the phone one last time, pressed play, and whispered, "I'll finish it, Lyd. I swear." Rain came down in sheets that morning, hammering the cafe roof like it had a grudge. Eli balanced on a ladder inside, pressing a dented bucket under the newest leak. The drip hit metal in steady rhythm, a reminder of everything that wasn't fixed. Rent overdue, cupboards near empty, and June's worn-out shoes drying by the heater upstairs. The air smelled of wet wood and rust, and beneath it all, coffee grounds that never quite washed away from the old counter. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaled, and muttered, "You said it'd be simple, Lyd. You never mentioned the leaks." By noon, he was out in the cold, tool belt heavy on his hips, walking to his next carpentry job. The wind coming off the harbor cut through his jacket. Cal Rivera waved from the pier, hauling nets, and shouted, "You fixin' that ghost cafe yet?" Eli raised a hand in a half salute. "Trying," he called back. The words hung there. Trying. That's all he seemed to do lately. The job site was an old boathouse. He replaced warped planks and tightened hinges while the foreman handed him cash by the hour. Every nail he drove felt like a countdown to groceries. When the rain turned sideways, he kept working, shoulders burning. At lunch, he sat in his truck, ate half a sandwich, and stared at the cafe through the windshield, its faded sign barely visible across the harbor. He thought about June's face when he told her there'd be pancakes again. Soon. He needed soon to mean something. When he returned that evening, the bucket inside was overflowing. Water spread across the floor in dark streaks. He grabbed towels, mopped, cussed under his breath, then stopped himself. "Not tonight," he said quietly, glancing at the framed photo of Lydia leaning against the wall. "You'd tell me to breathe first?" He closed his eyes and did. Outside, the storm softened to drizzle. June came down the stairs, hair a wild halo of sleep. "You're still working?" she asked. "Roof's leaking again," Eli said. "You cold?" She shook her head and handed him her sketchbook. On the page, she'd drawn the cafe. Same shape, but glowing, filled with people. "It's what it'll look like when you finish," she said. He smiled, throat tight. "We'll get there." They ate soup made from the last of the potatoes, sitting on overturned crates near the counter. The lights flickered once, then steadied. The storm moved out to sea, leaving the sound of dripping and distant thunder. Later, when June was asleep upstairs, Eli opened the cash tin on the shelf, $34, a handful of coins. Not enough for supplies, barely enough for rent. He leaned on the counter, the weight of exhaustion pulling at him. But then he looked at June's drawing, still propped under the lamp. The colors were messy but bright, orange light spilling from every window. He smiled faintly. "You'd like that one, Lyd," he said. "She's got your stubborn, Saturday mornings at Harbor Mart had a way of measuring a man. Eli pushed through the bell-clattering door with a scrap of roof shingle in one hand and a list in the other. The place smelled like cedar and machine oil, aisles of lumber stacked like patient soldiers. He set his jaw and headed for roofing nails, counting what was left in his pocket, $34 and some change. A couple of men by the register watched him pass, their voices dropping but not enough to be kind. "Turner," one said, tipping his cap. "Heard you bought the breakwater for $2. "Two more than it's worth," the other replied, chuckling. "Maybe sell coffee to ghosts. They're the only ones still eating there." Eli kept walking, letting the words scrape by like sand against a hull. He reached for a box of nails, then a roll of flashing, and calculated again. Not enough. He swapped the flashing for a smaller roll. "Build slow, build true," he murmured, the phrase settling his breath. Rick Talbot stood near the paint counter in a pressed jacket that didn't belong in a hardware store. He lifted a brow as Eli approached. "Morning, Eli," Rick said. "How's the Museum of Salt and Mildew?" "Coming along," Eli said. He put the nails on the counter. "Folks say you're fixing it up," Rick said, adjusting his cuff. "Ambitious. That roof alone will eat you alive." "It won't," Eli said. Rick smiled thinly. "I admire the optimism, but hope doesn't patch holes." He turned toward the gathered men. "Maybe he can start a ghost special. Half price if you pass through walls." Laughter rose, easy and mean. Eli steadied the box in his hands, the cardboard soft against his palm. He pictured June's drawing taped above the counter, orange light spilling from the windows. He pictured Lydia's note pinned on the fridge, the handwriting he could trace with his eyes closed. He placed the nails back down like setting a cornerstone. "I'll take these," Eli said to the clerk. The clerk, a woman with gray hair pulled tight under a cap, gave him a look that wasn't pity, just measurement. "You know we've got a clearance on tar," she said. "Not pretty, but it'll keep the rain out a bit." "Thank you," Eli said. He added the dented can to his stack and counted bills, careful, deliberate. Coins chimed like small bells on the counter. From the doorway, Cal Rivera called out, "Turner, you need a lift?" "I'm heading past the pier." Cal's voice cut through the laughter like a clean line. "I'm good," Eli said. He hefted the bag. "Appreciate it." Rick leaned back, arms folded. "You must like making things harder than they need to be." "I like finishing what I promised," Eli said. "What promise is that?" Rick asked. "The kind you say to someone who's not here to hold you to it," Eli said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The room quieted for a beat. Just the hum of the cooler and the click of the receipt printer. Eli nodded to the clerk, took the bag, and stepped outside into air that smelled like rain and brine. The harbor glinted through a gap in the buildings, pewter and patient. He stood for a moment, feeling the wind lift his collar, then started toward the cafe, the nails knocking a soft rhythm against his leg. "Sell coffee to ghosts," one of the men called after him. Eli didn't turn. "I'm serving the living," he said, and kept walking. If you're pulling for Eli to keep that promise in the face of laughter, subscribe now and stay with us as the work and the town begins to change. Eli knelt on the deck with a wire brush, pushing rust from a metal cafe chair until orange flakes freckled his hands. Salt air stung open skin, and the bristles squealed against the frame with every stroke. He worked in a rhythm he could trust, scrape, wipe, breathe, trying to ignore how the gulls on the pier sounded like they were laughing. June had left for school with a packed lunch he'd scraped together, a promise of hot cocoa after homework if the heater cooperated. For now, this was the job. One chair, then another, until the row of them stopped looking like shipwreck parts. A shadow drifted over him. Eli glanced up to see a woman in a bright beanie holding her phone sideways. "Just capturing some Harbor View hustle," she said, smiling. "Mara with the Title Talk blog." "Okay," Eli said. He kept scrubbing. The camera followed his hands. "So, Mr. Turner," she said, voice lifted in an interview sing-song, What's the business model on a $2 cafe? Work, he said. She laughed lightly. Catchy. Mind if I get a closer shot? The lens slid in. He could see himself reflected. Stubble, tired eyes, a smear of rust across his cheek. My readers love stories, Mara said, especially the quirky ones. He stood, wiped his hands on a rag. Nothing quirky, Eli said. Just trying to make it safe to sit. Mara panned across the stacked chairs, lingering on the boarded windows and the roof tar lines. People say the breakwater is cursed, she said. Storms, closures, that weird winter with the boiler. People say a lot, Eli said. He crouched again, pushing the brush through the narrow back slats. Copper sparks catching the light. Chairs first. Then coffee. By afternoon, the video was online. Cal Rivera shuffled up the boardwalk with a basket of bait and called, "Turner, you're famous." He held out his phone. The clip showed Eli on his knees, scrubbing. Sound turned up so the squeal of bristle on metal made your teeth hurt. The caption read, $2 Dreamer. Comments scrolled under it. Laughing emojis, snark, a few kind words drowned out by the rest. Eli exhaled through his nose. "That what they're calling it?" he asked. Cal nodded. "Some of it's mean," he said. "Some of it ain't. Internet's a tide. You don't fight the water, you ride it." "I'm not surfing today," Eli said. He turned the chair over to get at the feet, where rust hid in rings. "I've got 12 more." A teenager on a scooter rolled by, phone up, narrating, "There he is, the $2 Dreamer." Like Eli was a tourist attraction. Eli tightened his grip on the brush until it bit his palm. Lydia would have told him to smile and keep moving. He tried. As the sun fell, a little warmth tipped against the cafe's faded sign. The line of clean chairs, 4, then 6, then 8, caught the last light and looked almost hopeful. Eli laid out a drop cloth, shook paint, and stirred until the color smoothed. June's drawing waited in his pocket like a small engine. Mara returned, sheepish. "The post kind of blew up," she said. "If you want me to change the caption." "Leave it," Eli said. He dipped the brush and drew the first bright stroke across the metal. Dreams need work anyway. The folding chairs squeaked across the town hall floor as neighbors shuffled in from the cold, shaking off rain and talk. Eli took a seat near the back, hands clasped, nails still stained from tar. The agenda slid by in a blur. Dock repairs, parade budget, a lost dog, and then Rick Talbot stood, smile crisp as his blazer. "Next," Rick said, tapping the mic, "updates on our coastal properties, including that entrepreneurial endeavor at the old breakwater." A ripple ran through the room. Eli felt eyes turn, the weight of attention landing like a hand on his shoulder. Rick gestured with an open palm in Eli's direction. "Mr. Turner, you've embarked on quite the project," Rick said. "We applaud initiative, but we also value safety and realism." He let the last word dangle like bait. The crowd murmured. "I'm fixing the roof, the wiring, the floors," Eli said, rising, "one step at a time." "Admirable," Rick said, nodding. "But we all know that building has a history, fires, floods, failed reopenings, and permits, as you know, are not sentimental. They require evidence, cash, inspections. In short," he leaned on the podium, voice warm as a knife, "hope doesn't pay for permits." A polite laugh spilled from the front rows. Eli kept his chin level. "I'm not asking for a discount," he said. "I'm asking for the same process everyone else gets." "Of course," Rick said. "And the process demands an updated HVAC, a certified kitchen plan, ADA access at the rear entrance. That alone, what is it these days?" He turned to the clerk. 40? 50,000? The number hung in the air, a fog that thickened. Cal Rivera cleared his throat from the aisle. "He's doing the work himself," Cal said. "Man knows tools." "That cuts cost." Rick smiled, all teeth. "This isn't a shed on a back lot, Mr. Rivera. This is a public venue. Fish guts and good intentions won't pass inspection." A few people snorted. Eli felt the heat rise along his neck, then settle. He remembered Lydia's voice when bills stacked high, steady, practical kind. "We'll build slow," he said quietly. "We'll build true." Rick tapped the microphone with 2 fingers. "And slow, as we all know, is expensive. The town cannot be responsible for underwritten dreams. If this turns into a hazard, we will step in." He lifted a hand as if swearing an oath. "For the safety of Harborview." A woman in the second row, the hardware store clerk, spoke without standing. "He buys from us. He listens when I tell him what'll hold. That counts," she said. Rick turned, gracious as a host, moving a guest along. "Duly noted." He looked back to Eli. "What's your timeline, Mr. Turner? Your plan? Numbers, not quotes about building and truth." Eli glanced at the scuffed floor, then met the room. "The timeline is as long as it takes," he said. "The plan is to make it a place where no one eats alone. The numbers are what I have in my pocket and what I can earn with these hands." "Poetic," Rick said, setting down his pen. "But poetry doesn't sign permits." Eli exhaled. "Neither does fear," he said. Silence threaded the space between them. Somewhere outside, a gust of wind rattled the windows. The chair legs squeaked again as the meeting moved on, but some faces turned back to Eli with something different than mockery. Curiosity, maybe. He sat, heartbeat slowing, the promise beating steadier than the room's fluorescent hum. Eli woke before dawn, the kind of gray hour when the sea and sky looked like one long piece of slate. The cafe was cold, breath turning visible as he moved through it. He filled the dented percolator with water from the kettle and scooped the last of the grounds from an old tin. It wasn't much, stale, maybe even bitter, but the smell rose anyway, deep and familiar. He hadn't brewed coffee in this place since the day Lydia drew its name on a napkin. Back then they'd talked about cinnamon rolls, open windows, laughter spilling onto the deck. Now there was only the creak of boards and the hiss of the stove. Outside, the mail truck pulled up. The engine coughed once before cutting out, and the driver, Mabel, mid-60s, built like someone who'd seen too many winters, stepped out with a handful of envelopes. She spotted Eli through the window and waved. "Didn't expect to see smoke from this place again," she said as he opened the door. "Trying to make it livable," Eli said. "Coffee?" She sniffed the air. "If that's what I think it is, you just made my morning." He poured 2 mugs, chipped but clean, and handed one across the counter. Mabel took a cautious sip, eyes closing for a beat. "Best smell this town's had in years," she said, "even if it tastes like driftwood." Eli laughed softly, a sound he hadn't made in a while. "Driftwood's free," he said. She grinned. "So's hope, last I checked." She leaned against the counter. "You really bought this place for $2? "Yeah," he said. "Can't say I got a bargain. You could have bought something that didn't leak." "Didn't come with the same promise," he said. Mabel studied him. "Your wife, right? The one that ran the shelter pantry a few years back?" He nodded. "Lydia. She used to say food's just another way to tell someone they belong." Mabel set her cup down. "She fed my brother when he was sleeping in his truck. Didn't ask for a thing." She looked around the room, taking in the cracks, the missing tiles, the lonely chairs. "This place still has her in it," she said. Eli swallowed, throat tight. "That's the plan." When she left, the bell over the door gave a cheerful clang it hadn't managed in years. Eli stood still for a long time, watching the steam twist from her half-empty cup. He didn't dump it out. Instead, he set it near the window where the light could find it. The smell of coffee lingered even after it went cold, wrapping around the quiet like a promise renewed. Later, as he swept sawdust and debris from the floor, a fisherman passed by and shouted, "You opening soon?" Eli smiled to himself. "Someday," he called back. And for the first time, someday didn't sound far away. The sound of sanding filled the cafe like steady rain, soft but relentless. Eli worked one end of the counter while June stood on a stool, her small hands wrapped around a piece of sandpaper that was too big for her grip. Sawdust clung to her hair, and she kept blowing it from her face, only for more to fall. "It's snowing inside," she said, laughing. Eli smiled faintly. "Then we're rich in weather," he said. The wood beneath his hands was beginning to show its grain again. Oak, scarred but solid. It had been buried under years of neglect, but now it was breathing. He paused, flexing his aching wrist, and looked at his daughter. "You doing okay, Bug?" June nodded, eyes serious. Mom would have wanted this counter clean enough to roll dough on. He swallowed hard. "She would have," he said, "and she'd tell us to stop talking and keep working." By late afternoon, the room glowed gold from the sunset pushing through the windows. The air smelled of wood dust and paint thinner. Outside, the wind tossed gulls across the water, but inside, it was warm with motion. June hummed as she painted the sign laid flat on two sawhorses. The letters of the Breakwater Café took shape again, dark navy against the whitewashed wood. Her brushstrokes weren't perfect, too heavy in some places, too light in others, but Eli didn't correct her. "It looks alive again," he said. She tilted her head. "Can I put something under it?" "Like what?" "A heart," she said. "Small in the corner." He nodded. "Make it yours." When night fell, the lanterns came out. 2 camping lights and 1 old hurricane lamp that flickered whenever the wind found a crack. They cooked dinner on a single-burner stove, canned soup stretched with noodles, and a pan of biscuits from Marion's recipe. The air was thick with butter and steam, and June's laughter bounced off the newly sanded counter. "You know," she said between bites, "this doesn't feel like work anymore." "What's it feel like?" Eli asked. "Like we're building our kitchen again," she said softly. He looked at her across the lantern light, her face warm and certain. "That's exactly what we're doing," he said. After they ate, June curled up under a blanket on the booth bench and fell asleep with a paintbrush still in her hand. Eli cleaned the dishes in a bucket, then sat beside her, the room humming with quiet life. Outside, the tide moved in slow rhythm against the pilings. He ran a hand over the counter again, the surface smooth now, and thought about Lydia's voice. "Build slow, build true." He leaned back, the flicker of the lantern painting soft light across the sign drying near the window. It wasn't finished, not even close, but for the first time, the place didn't feel empty. It felt like waiting, like the pause between prayer and answer. The morning fog clung low over the harbor, muting every sound except the quiet hiss of Eli's coffee pot. He stood behind the counter, apron dusted with flour, flipping pancakes on the old griddle he'd finally coaxed back to life. The door creaked open, letting in a rush of cold air and salt. 2 men stepped inside, fishermen by the look of them, boots slick with seawater, faces mapped with years of dawns. One nodded toward the sign above the counter. "Didn't know this place was open," the first said. "It's open enough," Eli replied. "Coffee's hot, food's honest." They exchanged a glance, half amusement, half curiosity, and took seats at the counter. The older one tapped the menu chalkboard with a gloved finger. "Pancakes and coffee, that it?" "For now," Eli said. "Good," the man grunted. "Simple works." Eli poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs, steam rising in thin ribbons. The fisherman sipped and said nothing for a while, just listened to the low hum of the heater and the seagulls outside. June appeared from the back, still in her school sweater, and placed 2 plates of pancakes in front of them, each stack golden and steaming. The younger fisherman raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect real butter." "Only kind we use," June said, chin lifted just a little. They ate quietly, but Eli watched their faces as the first bites disappeared, saw the way their shoulders softened. When they finished, the older man pulled out a few bills and set them on the counter. "What do we owe?" "$5 for the meal, $1 for the coffee," Eli said. The man counted 6, then added another 10. "Keep the rest," he said. "This place feels like the old days." Eli blinked, unsure what to say. The bills looked crisp against the counter, like they didn't belong in a place held together by paint and faith. "You sure?" he asked. The man shrugged. "Ain't charity, just worth it." The two of them stood, stretched, and headed for the door. The younger one paused. "You fix this place up a bit more, people'll come back." "Town's hungry for something real," Eli nodded. "Tell them we'll be here." "Already planning to," the man said. "Fishermen talk." When the door closed behind them, the cafe went still again except for the ticking of the clock above the window. Eli reached out, touched the bills, then folded them carefully and slipped them into the small tin he kept under the register. It wasn't much, but it felt sacred, like proof that faith, when worked with hands, could feed itself. June leaned on the counter beside him. "Do you think they'll really tell people?" He smiled faintly. "Fishermen exaggerate for a living," he said. "This time I hope they don't." Outside, the fog was lifting. A slice of sun touched the water, bright and sharp. Eli took off his apron and stepped to the window, watching two figures head down the pier. "Guess we're open now," he said softly. The photo wasn't staged. Eli didn't know Mara was there when he lifted June onto the counter so she could reach the chalkboard and fix a crooked letter. He held her steady with one hand, a dish towel slung over his shoulder, both of them dusted with flour. Light slipped through the front windows and made the room look softer than it was. Mara stood outside in her beanie, shot through the glass, and kept walking. By noon, the image was everywhere, first on Tidal Talk, then shared and reshared until his phone blinked like a buoy in a storm. June hovered by the register, eyes wide. "Dad, look," she said, turning the screen. "It says Father-Daughter Café." Eli squinted at the comments swimming below the photo. "About time someone cared," a stranger wrote. "Give them a permit already," another added, followed by a small flood of heart emojis and stories from people who missed the Breakwater's cinnamon rolls from 20 years back. He expected mockery. What he saw instead felt like the tide changing direction. He put the phone down. "Back to work," Eli said. June grinned. "Back to work," she said, and reached for the chalk again. The bell clattered. A couple in rain jackets stepped in, hesitant at first, then smiling like they'd found a secret. "We saw you online," the woman said. "Drove over from Cedar Bay for coffee." "Coffee's honest," Eli said, pouring 2 mugs. "The milk is cold and the pancakes don't brag." They laughed and sat. While they drank, Eli moved through the small motions that had started to feel like a prayer. Wipe the counter, turn the chair, check the kettle, breathe. The room felt warmer, as if approval from 1,000 strangers could raise the temperature. Outside, gulls rode a gust, and the harbor showed streaks of silver where the clouds thinned. Cal Rivera popped his head in with a wet cap and a grin. "Turner, your faces are all over my niece's phone," Cal said. "She says you're wholesome." He made the word sound like a compliment and a riddle. "Tell her we're just hungry," Eli said. "Hungry's fine," Cal said. "Hungry works." By afternoon, the break in weather brought feet to the boardwalk. People lingered at the window, reading the chalkboard that June had rewritten 3 times, finally settling on "open enough" under the Breakwater Café. Mara swung by with a to-go cup and a careful expression. "I was going to ask before posting, but it moved fast," she said. "You want me to take it down?" "It's out there now," Eli said. "Might as well let it ride." "It's a good look," Mara said. "Not the $2 dreamer thing. This is, care." He nodded, unsure what to do with praise that didn't dent. After she left, he opened the cash tin for the 3rd time that day and added a few bills. He didn't count them. He just folded the edges neat and set the tin back in its place, like it meant something holy. Near closing, June tugged his sleeve. "Do you think Mom saw it?" she asked. Eli steadied himself on the counter, felt the smooth wood under his palm. "She'd say the picture's fine," Eli said, "and then she'd tell us to refill the coffee." They refilled. The bell rang. The comments kept coming, not all kind. But enough. Standing in the glow of the front windows, Eli watched strangers become neighbors one cup at a time and thought, for the first time, that the town might be ready to believe in the promise with him. The man's car was too clean for the harbor road. Chrome wheels, shoes that didn't know salt or dust. He stepped out, sunglasses glinting, and looked up at the cafe with the kind of smile people use when they're already counting something in their heads. Eli was on the ladder brushing fresh paint along the window trim when the man called up. "Mr. Turner, right? I'm Glenn Latham, Harborview Realty." Eli climbed down slowly. "If you're selling shingles, I'm set," he said. Glenn laughed, practiced and polite. No, I'm not selling. I'm offering. Thought we could talk about that lot of yours." He gestured at the cafe, then toward the stretch of Harbor Road where a new boutique sign hung. "This section's changing fast. Investors want to revitalize the waterfront. Restaurants, condos, artisan market, the works. You've got prime real estate here, my friend. It's worth more than the paint you're putting on it." Eli wiped his hands on a rag. "Not for sale," he said. Glenn's smile didn't flicker. "I figured you might say that. Still, I came prepared." He pulled a folder from his leather briefcase. Glossy papers already creased from use. 20,000 cash offer. Close next week. You could walk away clean. No permits, no inspections, no headaches. Frankly, it'd be a mercy. Eli looked past him at the water. The tide was low, leaving the rocks streaked with green. "Mercy," he said quietly, tasting the word. "That what this looks like to you?" Glenn adjusted his tie. "Mr. Turner, this building's a sinkhole. The roof, the plumbing, half your wiring's older than you are. I'm trying to help you cut your losses before they bury you." June stepped out of the doorway then, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. Her hair was tied back with a paint-streaked ribbon. "Dad, do you want the one with the spoon or the one without?" "The one without," Eli said. He took it from her and she lingered, curious eyes flicking between the men. Glenn offered her a smile. "You must be June. You like living here?" She nodded. "It smells like pancakes," she said. "Bet it does," Glenn said, chuckling. "Well, your dad and I were just talking about how much money someone might pay for this place." June frowned. "We don't need money," she said. "We need people." Eli glanced at her, then back to Glenn. "You heard her," he said. "It's not for sale, it's for service." For the first time, Glenn's charm cracked. "Service?" he repeated. "Feeding people who don't have much," Eli said, "reminding this town it still has a table." "That kind," Glenn sighed, closing the folder. "You can't feed sentiment to the bank, Mr. Turner." "No," Eli said, "but it can feed everyone else." The man hesitated, searching for something clever, then gave up and walked toward his car. Gravel crunched under polished soles. June tugged Eli's sleeve. "Did we just say no to $20,000? Eli took a slow sip, the cocoa already cooling. "We just said yes to what matters more." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of the harbor into the open door. Inside, the cafe's sign gleamed new against the fading light, steady and sure. If you believe some things can't be bought, subscribe and keep following Eli's story, where worth is measured in more than money. Marion Clark arrived without knocking, the bell clanging as if it owed her money. She moved like a woman who had timed her life by ovens, decisive, no wasted motion, coat off, sleeves up, eyes already scanning the room. "Smell butter," Marion said. "Good sign." June, flour on her cheek, peered from behind the counter and lifted a tray. "Biscuits," June said. "I used your recipe. Well, the one Dad remembered from the church supper." Marion took a seat, planted both hands on the table, and nodded at the tray. "Bring me one." "No, 2. One to taste, one to prove it wasn't luck." June grinned and set them down. Marion broke the first biscuit open with her thumbs, steam rising in a soft puff. She sniffed, bit, considered. "Too high on the flour," Marion said, "but you did right on the fold." See the layers? That's patience. Eli hovered, wiping his hands on a towel. We're still learning, Eli said. You're building, Marion said. Learning is the heat. Building is what sets. She finished the first biscuit, then half the second, crumbs neat as if they'd been arranged. Again, she said. Less flour. Cold butter. Don't fear the sticky. June reached for the bowl, determined. Mom used to say that, June said. Don't fear the sticky. Marion's eyes softened. Lydia told me that when we rolled pie crusts for the shelter fundraiser. She was good with people, didn't flinch at mess of any kind. Marion glanced at Eli. She once stood in my kitchen with a man shaking from withdrawal, and she handed him a bowl and said, Stir for me. You'll feel better if your hands are busy. And he did. Eli felt the room narrow, then open again. That sounds like her, Eli said. Marion tapped the counter, small rhythms keeping time. She also left a stack of recipe cards at the pantry. But they weren't just recipes, notes on who liked what. Mrs. Ellis can't chew nuts, swap oats. Donnie won't eat unless there's cinnamon, use extra. That kind of kindness. June turned the dough with a bench scraper, jaw set. Can you teach me all of it? She asked. Not all, Marion said. Some you only learn by burning one pan and saving the next. But I'll be here. Mornings, we'll do biscuits, then rolls. You'll hate me by Wednesday. June laughed. Deal. Marion pointed at Eli. And you. No more guessing oven temps. We calibrate. We fix that back hinge. And you stop serving coffee in chipped mugs when you have uneven stacks. Pick the good ones, pride but quiet. Eli nodded. Yes, ma'am. Marion stood, already moving again. She opened drawers, found a pen, and began writing on a brown paper bag, measurements, short lines, arrows. Her handwriting marched like soldiers. Here, Marion said, sliding it to June. My base biscuit. Yours now. Adjust to taste. Fold twice. Pray once. June traced the words with a finger. I will, she said. Marion fixed Eli with a look that wasn't unkind. Lydia believed this place was a table. Keep it a table, not a stage. That's the plan, Eli said. Marion tugged on her coat. Tomorrow. 6, Marion said, and was gone, the bell clanging again, the door letting in a blade of cold air and then closing on the warmth. June held up a new biscuit, edges cleaner, height proud. Try again, she said. Eli bit, smiled. Better, he said, much. The cafe felt quieter that week, too quiet. Eli noticed it first in the mornings. The bell over the door didn't ring. The coffee pot stayed full longer, the air too still. The few regulars who did stop by sat near the windows, speaking softer than usual. Even Cal, who usually cracked jokes about the fisherman's luck, just nodded at his cup and drank without a word. June sensed it too. Did we do something wrong? She asked one evening, wiping tables that didn't need it. Eli hesitated. Not wrong, he said. Just loud. He gestured toward his phone on the counter. On the screen, the local feed glowed with comments under a post titled, The $2 Dreamer Cafe. Charming or dangerous? The photos were unflattering. Peeling paint, exposed wires during renovation, a bucket under a leak. The words underneath hurt more than the pictures. Looks unsafe. Health hazard waiting to happen. Guy's heart's big, but the roof's rotten. June frowned. That's not true, she said. We fixed the roof. Truth's not what people click for, Eli said quietly. He locked the phone, set it face down, and stared out the window where fog pressed against the glass. The reflection of the empty cafe stared back, chairs tucked in, counters clean, the sign outside barely visible in the mist. He thought about Lydia, how she used to say, when people can't build, they'll tear down what reminds them they could. Maybe this was that. The next morning, Eli still opened on time. He wiped every surface twice, checked the stove, polished the mugs until they caught light, but no one came. By mid-afternoon, he pulled the chairs onto tables and sat near the window, listening to the hum of the fridge and the distant clang of boat masts. Marion arrived without announcement, her coat dripping rain. Saw the nonsense online, she said. Can't stop folks from spitting wind. She set a paper bag on the counter. Scones. Fresh. Let the smell fight back, Eli smiled thinly. Might be too quiet to fight. Nonsense, Marion said, unpacking them. Smell carries farther than gossip if you keep the door open. She opened the door wide, letting the harbor air swirl in. A few minutes later, a fisherman passing by sniffed the air, peeked inside, and grinned. Thought you were closed, he said. Not today, Eli said. Never for good. The man stepped in, took a scone, left a few bills. You fix one thing at a time, he said. After he left, June climbed onto the stool beside her father. Should we write something online? No, Eli said. We'll answer with what we do, not what we say. She nodded. Together they rearranged the tables, lit the small lamp by the counter, and set out a plate of warm scones by the open door. The smell began to drift down the street, sweet and stubborn. That night, Eli checked his phone again. Buried among the harsh words was a single comment that made him pause. Drove by today. Smelled like hope. He read it twice, then smiled. Guess we're not done yet, he said. The phone rang late, long after the dinner rush that never came. Eli sat by the counter, counting change from the cash tin, when the screen lit up with his brother's name, Mark Turner, Boston. He almost let it go to voicemail, but the silence in the cafe was too heavy. He answered. Eli, Mark said, his voice brisk, city-sharp. You sound tired. Long day, Eli said. Yeah, I bet. Listen, I saw that article about your cafe, the one online. You really still doing that? Eli looked around the room, paint chipped, lights dim, June's drawings taped along the back wall. Still doing it, he said. There was a sigh on the other end. Man, you've got to stop bleeding yourself dry for that place. You've got skills, carpentry, maintenance. You could come here, get union work, real pay, benefits. June could go to a better school. You wouldn't have to scrape by in some broken town. Eli rubbed a hand over his face. It's not about scraping by. What's it about then? Mark said. Pride? Ghosts? You think Lydia would want you wasting your life fixing a building that's going to collapse again next winter? Eli's jaw tightened. Don't talk about her like that. I'm talking about you, Mark said. She's gone, Eli. You've got a kid to think about. You keep chasing this dream, you'll end up with nothing to hand her. Eli didn't answer right away. The hum of the refrigerator filled the pause, steady and low. I am handing her something, he said finally. A place that means something. Mark laughed softly, almost pitying. Meaning doesn't pay the bills. You've always been like this. Too stubborn to see when something's finished. She's the reason I started it, Eli said, and June's the reason I keep going. Mark's voice softened. You've got to cut your losses, little brother. Move inland. Start over somewhere that's not dying. Eli stared through the window where fog curled against the glass. This town's not dying, he said. It's just waiting for someone to believe in it again. There was another sigh, tired now. You always did like lost causes, Mark said. Think about it, okay? Before the bank thinks for you, the line went dead. Eli set the phone down, exhaling slowly. He hadn't noticed June standing in the doorway to the stairs, holding her sketchbook against her chest. Her eyes were wet but steady. Are we losing? She asked quietly. He turned toward her. No, he said. We're learning the cost. Uncle Mark thinks we should quit. Uncle Mark's good at math, Eli said. But not everything adds up in numbers. She nodded, wiping her face. Mom wouldn't quit. No, Eli said, she wouldn't. June walked over, placed her sketchbook on the counter, and flipped it open to a new drawing. The cafe, lights glowing against the dark, people inside laughing. She looked up at him. Then we don't either, she said. Eli smiled, small but sure. No, we don't. He reached for the broom and handed it to her. Come on, partner. Let's clean up for tomorrow. The harbor was empty except for the sound of ropes knocking against masts and the low, restless hum of the sea. Eli sat on the edge of the pier, boots dangling just above the dark water. The cafe lights behind him had gone out for the night, but their faint reflection trembled on the ripples like a heartbeat refusing to stop. He held his cap in his hands, turning it over slowly, the way a man might handle something sacred and fragile. The cold bit through his jacket, but he didn't move. There was no one to talk to, and yet he spoke anyway. "If I keep the promise," he said quietly, voice rough in the wind, "you'll make it enough." The words came simple, unpolished, like the first swing of a hammer. He didn't ask for money or miracles or mercy, just enough. Enough strength to wake early, enough patience to keep trying, enough light for June to believe this dream was worth seeing through. He watched the tide crawl in, soft and stubborn. Lydia used to say the ocean was a good listener. It didn't interrupt, just waited. He could almost hear her laugh in the water's rhythm, soft and steady. Behind him, footsteps approached. Cal Rivera's voice cut through the wind. "Didn't expect to find you praying out loud," Cal said. Eli half smiled. "Didn't think anyone was listening." "Don't need an audience for that kind of talk," Cal said, easing down beside him with the careful groan of someone older than they felt. He handed over a thermos. "Coffee. Black and ugly, just how you like it." Eli took it, nodding. The steam fogged his glasses. "Appreciate it." Cal stared out at the water. "Storm rolling in tomorrow might mess with the supply routes. You good on stock?" "Barely," Eli said. "Marion's bringing flour. We'll stretch the rest." Cal grunted approval. "You know folks see what you're doing, even the ones who pretend not to. Maybe they're just waiting to see if you'll last." "I plan to," Eli said. "Then they'll come," Cal said simply. "Takes time for people to trust a new fire." They sat in silence for a while, the night breathing around them. Lights from the far side of the harbor flickered through fog. Eli took another sip, then said softly, "My brother thinks I should leave." "Start fresh," Cal chuckled. "Fresh isn't always better. Sometimes you've got to keep cooking what's on the stove." Eli smiled at that, the warmth of the thermos cutting through the chill. "Thanks," he said. Cal stood, stretching. "You're doing right by her, you know," he said, nodding toward the cafe. "Lydia. She'd be proud." Eli didn't answer right away. He looked at the horizon, where the sea met sky in a thin, trembling line. "I hope so," he said. "I just want this place to feed people the way she fed me. Quiet, steady, no show." Cal clapped his shoulder once, solid and sure, then walked off down the pier. Eli stayed a while longer, watching the tide climb, the first drops of rain beginning to fall. He didn't move. He just whispered once more, almost to himself, "Enough," and let the word drift with the wind. Sunday came gray and raw, the kind of morning that would normally keep people home, but Eli unlocked the cafe door and propped it wide as if sun were guaranteed. He set a large pot of soup on to simmer, vegetable stock stretched with beans and carrots, and lined the counter with baskets of Marion's biscuits. June taped her new sign to the inside of the front window, careful with each corner so it wouldn't curl. The letters were bold, navy paint over white board, "Feed first, profit later." She stepped back, squinting. "Is that too big?" she asked. "Big enough," Eli said. "Needs to be read from the sidewalk." Marion arrived in her church coat, flower on the sleeve anyway. "You got your pots hot?" Marion asked, lifting lids, sniffing like a general before a march. "Good. People can't talk on empty stomachs." Cal followed with a sack of day-old rolls from the dock bakery. "Traded stories for bread," Cal said. "Seems your Sundays got out to the boats." At 11, the first pair walked in. A young man with a baby in a carrier and a woman whose eyes said she'd been up all night. "How much?" the man asked, glancing at the chalkboard. Eli nodded toward the window. "Pay what you can," Eli said. "If that's nothing, you're still welcome." The woman exhaled like someone had loosened a knot. "Thank you," she whispered. June hurried bowls to the table, careful not to slosh, and the baby's small fingers curled toward the steam. More came in twos and threes. A retired teacher who said, "I'm fine for money, but lonely is expensive." A teenager with hands blackened from engine grease. A fisherman between runs, cheeks wind-burned, dropping a folded bill in the jar and pretending not to. Eli ladled soup, Marion cut biscuits, June refilled water. The three of them moving in a rhythm that felt like music you didn't notice until it stopped. Rick Talbot paused at the door, reading the sign. "Creative accounting," Rick said. "How long can you keep the lights on like this?" Eli wiped his hands on a towel. "Long enough to matter," Eli said. Rick's gaze ticked to the crowded room, the laughter that rose and fell, the hush when a prayer of thanks slipped out from a corner table. His jaw tightened, then loosened. "Don't block the rear exit," Rick said, pointing at a chair. "Safety." Marion slid it aside with a look that said she could bake and comply at the same time. By mid-afternoon, the soup pot was a memory. Eli scraped the last carrots from the bottom and found the tip jar heavier than it had ever been. Not full, not solved, just heavier. He felt it in his palms like proof. June stood by the window, reading her own sign as if checking if it still meant what it said. "Think it worked?" June asked. "It fed people," Eli said. "That's the whole measure." As the last guests left, the bell clanged once more and quiet settled in, warm and tired. Eli leaned on the counter, listening to the soft clink of dishes. "Sundays, then," he said. Marion nodded. "Sundays," Marion said. Cal wiped a table and grinned. Harborview's got itself a new tide. The storm rolled in without warning, wind sharp enough to shake the cafe's old windows until the glass rattled in its frame. Eli ran from the front room to the kitchen, the first crack of thunder hitting close enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Rain drove sideways against the back wall, and before he could seal the vent, water found its way through a seam above the stove. The drip turned to a pour. Within minutes, the floor was slick, the cardboard boxes swelling and bursting open. Flour, sugar, and coffee grounds bled into muddy streaks that swirled around his boots. "Dad!" June shouted from the doorway, her hair plastered to her forehead. "The lights are flickering." "Unplug everything," he called. He grabbed a mop, pushed water toward the drain that barely worked, but the storm laughed at him, steady, relentless. Lightning flashed through the window, turning the stainless steel white for a split second before the power snapped out completely. Darkness pressed in, thick and heavy, broken only by the beam of June's flashlight from the hall. When it was over, the cafe smelled like wet wood and failure. The rain had eased, leaving the kitchen wrecked. Bags of flour slumped like corpses, the bread dough drowned in its bowl. Eli leaned on the counter, water dripping from his sleeves. He could feel it in his chest, the quiet urge to just stop. June came in holding one of Lydia's framed photos, rescued from the shelf by the register. Lydia was standing in front of their old apartment, apron tied, laughing mid-sentence. June set it gently on the counter. "I didn't want it to fall," she said. Eli stared at the photo, unable to look away. "She'd tell me to cut my losses," he said softly. "No, she wouldn't," June said. "She'd say we've done enough." June shook her head. She'd say, "Build slow, build true, like she always did." Her voice wavered. She'd say, "We can fix it." He felt the sting behind his eyes and turned away, gripping the edge of the counter until his knuckles whitened. "Everything we saved is ruined, June." All of it. June stepped closer, barefoot in the puddles. "Not all," she said. "We still have her." Eli followed her gaze back to the photo. Lydia's face seemed to catch what little light remained, her smile calm, unbothered by storms. He exhaled, long and uneven, then reached out and wiped the moisture from the glass with the hem of his sleeve. "You're right," he said. "She'd tell me to start mopping before the floor buckles." Together they cleaned in silence, wringing towels into buckets until the water stopped pooling and the floor began to dry. Outside, The wind softened to a whisper, and the smell of the sea crept back through the cracks. When the lights flickered back on, faint but steady, Eli looked up at Lydia's picture again. "You win," he murmured. "We'll start again." June leaned against him, small and tired. "We always do," she said. Marian came early that morning, as she always did, the dawn just beginning to stretch over the harbor. She moved through the cafe like someone who'd known its rhythms before they were written, humming low as she stacked flour sacks and checked the ovens. The storm from last week had left a chill in the air, but the smell of baking still managed to chase it off. While cleaning the back shelf, she pulled down a stack of cookbooks, their spines faded and swollen from years of humidity. One slipped from her hands, landing open on the floor with a soft thud. A folded piece of paper fluttered out. "Now what are you hiding?" Marian muttered, kneeling to pick it up. The envelope was yellowed, Lydia's name printed neatly on the front. No stamp, no address, just a few words. "To whoever keeps the light on." Eli came in a moment later, wiping his hands on a rag. "Morning," he said. Marian held up the envelope. "You keep secrets from me, Turner?" He frowned, then froze. "That's her handwriting," he said. He took it carefully, like it might crumble. "I thought I'd seen every note she ever left." "Seems she had one more," Marian said. He opened it slow, the paper crisp, but still carrying the faint smell of cinnamon, Lydia's kitchen scent. The letter began in her familiar script, looping and patient. "If this cafe ever stands again, it should do more than serve food. It should remind people they're still needed. Feed the stomach, yes, but feed the heart first. Make it a place where work and kindness taste the same. If I'm not here, tell whoever is that the recipe for this place isn't sugar or flour. It's trust." Eli's throat tightened as he read aloud. June came down the stairs halfway through, rubbing her eyes. "That's Mom's voice," June whispered. Marian nodded. "She was writing to the future," Marian said. "And looks like she got the right audience." Eli set the letter on the counter, pressing it flat. "A blueprint," he said quietly. "Not for walls, for how to live." They stood there in silence, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. The words on the page seemed to breathe. Lydia's handwriting continued near the bottom. "When things break, and they will, remember that care fixes more than nails ever could. Promise me this place will always stay open enough for someone who needs it most." Eli swallowed hard. "She knew," he said. "She knew we'd need to be reminded." Marian folded her arms, her voice softer than usual. "You already kept her promise, Eli. You just didn't know she'd written it down." He looked out the window at the harbor, the morning light spilling gold over the water. "I think she'd tell us to hang it up," he said. Marian smiled. "Front and center," Marian said. June took the letter, slid it into a frame, and placed it near the cafe's entrance. The sunlight caught the paper just right, turning the ink faintly blue. Beneath it, she taped a small card that read, "Recipe for Community Care." Eli stood back and nodded. "To whoever keeps the light on," he said softly. "Guess that's us now." The first call came just after dawn, Marian's floury hands cradling the cafe phone like it might burn. "You're in the paper," Marian said, voice clipped with surprise. "Front page of the Regional. The $2 cafe that feeds a town." Eli blinked at the light widening across the harbor windows as the bell clattered and Mabel, the mail carrier, pushed in with a canvas sack. "Hope you got a bigger counter," Mabel said, setting it down. "Envelopes, honey. Lots of them." June skidded in from the stairs, hair half-braided, and grabbed the first stack. Eli slit one with a butter knife and pulled out a handwritten note and a check for $25. "From a widow in Bangor," he said. She wrote, "Your sign made me cry. I eat alone most nights. Please keep a table for people like me." Mara arrived seconds later, beanie tipped back, phone in the air. It's everywhere, Mara said, breathless. They quoted Lydia's line, "Feed first, profit later," and your Sundays. Commenters are asking how to help. Eli stared at the room, the patched floors, the counters still scarred in places, and felt something he hadn't in a long time. The sense that the tide was not only turning, but carrying them. Cal stepped in from the pier, boots wet, eyes shining. "Doc radio says you're Harborview's heart now," Cal said. "Never thought a cafe could outtalk fish." "Fish don't write checks," Marion replied, already clearing space. The bell rang again and again, neighbors with coins, strangers with bills, a teenager who slid his last $3 into the jar and said, "You fed me Sunday." "This is me feeding back." June taped a piece of paper to the wall and began tallying donations with careful lines. "It's not just money," June said. "They're telling stories." A TV van nosed into a spot by the curb, and a reporter with careful hair shook Eli's hand. "We want to film the room as is," the reporter said. "No polish. People want what's real." Eli nodded, and when the camera rolled, he stood behind the counter with June beside him and Marion in the background, slicing biscuits, and said, "We're just a table with a door that opens." The reporter asked, "Why keep it? Pay what you can." And Eli said, "Because someone once fed us when we couldn't pay," his voice steady as wood grain. Rick Talbot paused outside, reading the taped clippings, face unreadable. He stepped in only to move a chair from the fire exit and mutter, "Keep this clear," before leaving as another stack of mail thumped down. Mabel grinned. "I'll need a bigger bag." By late afternoon, the jar was heavy, and the online fund Mara set up crossed a number that made Eli sit before his knees buckled. "Enough to replace the stove," Eli said. "Enough to fix the rear ramp," Marion added. June tucked Lydia's letter, now framed, onto a small shelf above the counter where everyone could see it. Light slanted through the window and touched the glass. A small halo. "We're going to make it," June said. Eli placed his hand over hers and whispered, "We're going to make room." The town archives smelled like old paper and salt, the kind of room where stories learned to wait their turn. Eli stood at the counter with June and Marion while the archivist, Helen Park, rolled a cart toward them. "You called about the breakwater," Helen said, adjusting her glasses. "Thought I knew every chapter, but this one surprised me." She set a bound stack of minutes and a faded photograph on the table. "Harborview Relief Committee, 1933. That building wasn't a cafe then. Folks called it the communal kitchen." June leaned in. "Like our Sundays?" she asked. "Exactly like that," Helen said. "Only every day for 2 winters straight. Fishermen brought what they had. Teachers served after class. No one ate alone." She pointed to the photograph. A long table, steam rising, faces lined by hard seasons and stubborn hope. The doorway and windows were unmistakable. Eli traced the frame with his eyes, feeling the room he knew reflected back from another time. Marion crossed her arms, the corners of her mouth softening. "So we didn't invent kindness," Marion said. "We remembered it." Helen nodded, pleased, "which is why the Historical Commission met this morning. With the documentation here and the press you've received about Feed First, the board voted to grant heritage status to the breakwater." Effective immediately, Eli blinked. "Heritage," he said, testing the word like a nail to see if it would hold. "What does that change?" Helen smiled. "It recognizes what the building has meant, what it's still doing. It opens doors to preservation grants and gives you some breathing room with improvements. Mostly it says this place matters to the town's memory." She slid a certificate across the counter. "You deserve that." June squeezed Eli's arm. "We're official," she whispered. Rick Talbot appeared in the doorway, raindrops clinging to his coat. He hovered for a beat, then stepped in. "Heard there was action on the archives," Rick said. "Wanted to see it myself." Helen lifted the photograph. Rick studied it, jaw working. "My grandfather told me about those lines," Rick said quietly. "I thought he was just making it big." He looked at Eli. "Seems he wasn't." "We're just carrying it forward," Eli said. Rick cleared his throat. Heritage status doesn't fix wiring, Rick said, but it honors the heart. You keep the back exit clear, you follow safety, and I'll help where I can. The last words came out awkward, as if he had to pry them loose. Marion gave a tiny nod. We'll hold you to that, Marion said. Outside, the harbor brightened as the edge of cloud lifted. They walked back toward the cafe together, certificate tucked under Eli's arm, June trotting to keep pace. Through the front windows, the counter caught the first strip of sun, and for a moment the room seemed to recognize itself. Kitchen, table, refuge. Eli set the certificate by the register and stood in the doorway, listening to the distant clang of the masts and the hum of a town, remembering. Feels like the building took a breath, June said. It did, Eli said, and so did we. Marion snapped on the lights. All right, Marion said. Heritage or not, people still get hungry at noon. Let's work. The letter came folded in an envelope so plain it almost went unnoticed in the morning mail stack. Eli opened it between customers, expecting another thank you note or donation slip. Instead, the words made him sit down. The Prescott Community Foundation wishes to propose a partnership. We are prepared to invest $74 million to replicate the Breakwater Cafe's Pay What You Can model nationwide under the name the Lydia Initiative. He read it twice, then again, tracing the lines as if they might vanish. Marion leaned over his shoulder. 74 what? She asked. Million, he said softly. She laughed once, short and disbelieving. They put the comma in the wrong place. June snatched the letter and squinted at it. It says Mom's name, she whispered. The Lydia Initiative. Her fingers trembled on the paper. Dad, that's... I know, he said. He reached for the counter to steady himself. Outside, sunlight caught the new heritage plaque by the door, the brass shining like something alive. The phone rang before he could speak again. It was the foundation director, calm but warm. Mr. Turner, we've followed your story, she said. The work you're doing, feeding, teaching, rebuilding, it's what our cities need. We want to help expand it. Eli's voice came slow, deliberate. This is a small cafe, he said. We don't even have matching chairs. That's the beauty of it, she said. It's human scale. We don't want a chain. We want a network of tables where no one eats alone. Your wife's principle, feed first, profit later, that's what we're naming it for. He closed his eyes. Lydia's name in her voice felt like wind filling a sail. If we do this, Eli said, it has to stay honest. No cutting corners, no forgetting why we started. Agreed, she said. We'll send a team next week to discuss logistics. You'll guide us, and Harborview will remain the heart of it all. When the call ended, Eli sat there, the quiet stretching wide. June was already at the window, looking out toward the harbor. She'd be proud, June said. She'd tell us to get back to work, Marion added. Eli smiled. She always did. He picked up the letter again, thumb brushing the ink where Lydia's name was written in print so clean it almost glowed. He felt the years collapse, the first bucket of leaks, the cold mornings, the laughter that had returned one table at a time, all of it leading here to something that would outlast even the memory of the struggle. That afternoon they closed early. Eli and June walked down to the pier, the tide coming in soft. What if it's too big for us? June asked. Then we build slow, Eli said, like she taught us. He handed her the letter, now creased from his grip. June folded it neatly, then slipped it into her sketchbook. We'll need more tables, she said. Yeah, Eli said, looking out at the water, his voice steady. And a lot more hands. The boardroom at Town Hall smelled of new paint and paper, too clean, too polished. Eli sat across from the Foundation's team, their laptops open, pens tapping. A large map of the coast lay spread before them, dots marking the next potential cafe sites. We can move fast, one of them said. Prefabs, imported materials, consistent branding. We'll hire contractors from out of state to keep deadlines tight. Eli leaned back, hands folded. No, he said. The room paused. No? He nodded. If we're building something meant to feed communities, we start with the people already in them. Locals first. Always. The project lead frowned. Mr. Turner, hiring locally slows expansion. It's more expensive, less predictable. Eli cut in gently. So was this cafe, he said. It took years, but it's still standing. Every beam in that place carries a name. You build fast, you lose that. We're not selling efficiency, we're teaching endurance. A silence followed. Marion, seated beside him, leaned toward the mic. You want the Lydia Initiative to live, she said. Then it has to grow like she would have done it, hand to hand, kitchen to kitchen. The Foundation's director smiled faintly, watching Eli. What are you proposing? Eli pointed to the blueprint. Start here. Harborview gets a training program. Apprenticeships in carpentry, baking, maintenance, bookkeeping. You pay for the rebuilds, but we train locals to run them. When we open new cafes, they go with the skills to keep it alive. Not charity. Craft. The director looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You'll oversee it? Eli exhaled. I'll start it. But it won't belong to me. Outside, word spread faster than the wind off the pier. By week's end, a line of townspeople waited outside the cafe. Teenagers, laid-off mill workers, retired tradesmen who missed the smell of sawdust. June stood by the door, handing out sign-up sheets. Dad says everyone learns something, she told each person. Doesn't matter how old you are. Inside, the hum of work began again. The clatter of hammers, the hiss of new paint, the rhythm of shared purpose. Cal showed a young deckhand how to brace a counter. Marion taught a single mother to knead dough by feel, not measure. Eli moved from table to table, sleeves rolled, checking joints, sanding corners. Slow, he'd remind them. Let the wood tell you when it's ready. By evening, the cafe smelled like labor and hope, sweat, bread, coffee. June pinned another sign to the window. Learn here, work here, feed here. The letters weren't perfect, but they carried something the Foundation's designs never could, hands behind them. When the last apprentice left, Eli stood at the doorway, looking out at the harbor dotted with lights. Marion wiped her hands on a towel. You realize they'll call you difficult after this, she said. Eli smiled. Good. Means we're doing it right. He turned off the lights, the cafe quiet except for the low creak of its boards. In that silence, he could almost hear Lydia's laugh again, steady, approving, alive in every nail they drove. If you believe the best way to build the future is by building people first, subscribe now and follow Eli and June as the Lydia Initiative takes root one hand, one lesson, one table at a time. Harborview changed first in the mornings. The boardwalk filled again, boots thumping, laughter carrying over the water, the smell of bread and coffee drifting like a tide that knew where it was going. Eli stood behind the counter, watching June pin a new notice to the wall beneath the heritage certificate. The paper was simple. Scholarship winners, spring term. 4 names in June's careful hand, each followed by a note. Books paid, tools provided, bus pass covered. She stepped back, chin lifted. Think it's okay to add one more? June asked. We have room if Cal's crew brings the fish fundraiser money. We'll make room, Eli said. We always do. Marion slid a tray from the oven, steam fogging her glasses. First come, first served, Marion said, setting out biscuits. Also first fed, second fed, and fed again if they're still hungry. The bell clanged, and in came a line that felt like family. Teachers, deckhands, retirees, the mail carrier, Mabel, who slapped a stack of envelopes on the counter. Donation letters, Mabel said, plus 3 thank yous that made me cry in the truck. She patted the register. Put me down for dish duty at noon. Cal leaned on the sill, wind in his beard, holding a jar of bills. Fish fry turned into a fish festival, Cal said. Whole dock showed. We told them it's for the kids who don't think college is for them. Turns out the town's got a soft spot for the tough cases. Rick Talbot stepped in and didn't bother with the old politician posture. He carried 2 boxes of fresh mugs. Fire code audit next week, Rick said. You're clear on every point. And I chipped in for these. He set the boxes down, awkward. I figured pride, but quiet. Thank you, Eli said. He meant it. At noon, a young mother in a thrifted coat hesitated in the doorway, 2 kids at her knees. Eli waved her in. Lunch is covered, Eli said. No questions, just plates. The boy's eyes widened when the bowls arrived, steam curling, biscuits split open with butter melting to gold. The mother started to protest. I can volunteer, she said. I can sweep. Sit, Marion said, guiding her to a table. Your job is to eat while it's hot. June returned from the back with a clipboard. Dad, the scholarship forms keep coming, June said. One's from a girl who wants to be a welder. Then we buy her a mask and gloves, Eli said, and we find her a teacher. He looked toward the window where the harbor flashed silver under a clear sky. We promised we'd feed first. Sometimes that means feeding futures. In the afternoon, the cafe's new corkboard filled with notes. Thank you for the free meals while my hours were cut. Got my GED today. Apprenticeship starts Monday. Eli read them with a quiet he couldn't shake, a gratitude that made his chest feel too small. He thought of Lydia, how she'd write names in the margins of recipes and remember what each person needed. This, he realized, was the town writing back. As the sun slid low, light pooled across the counter, warm as a hand on the shoulder. Apprentices stacked chairs for the evening class. Marion rinsed trays. Cal mopped, humming off-key. June flipped the sign to Open Enough, Always. Eli wiped his hands on a towel and stood in the doorway, the harbor breathing steady beyond. We're not just open, he said, we're home. Lanterns swung from the boardwalk rails, throwing soft circles of light across the harbor as the festival woke up. The cafe's new awning fluttered, tables crowded with potluck trays and a sign that read, in June's blocky paint, Open Enough, Always. Eli moved through the hum with a roll of tickets in his hand, stopping to check the apprentice's carpentry booth, the scholarship jars, the battered coffee urn that never seemed to empty. Music rose from a fiddler near the pier, loose and joyful. Marion passed with a tray of biscuits like a general inspecting troops. Keep them hot, Marion said. Joy eats more than sadness. Rick Talbot approached, jacket off, sleeves rolled, not performing for once. He looked like a man caught off guard by his own feet. I said I'd help, Rick said. Where do you want me? Eli studied him for a heartbeat, then pointed to the dish tent where a mountain of plates already leaned. There, Eli said, if you're serious. I am, Rick said. He grabbed an apron, clumsy with the ties, and stepped into the steam and clatter. Cal whistled, amused. Councilman at the sink, Cal said. Didn't have that on my bingo card. Rick glanced up, cheeks ruddy. People are watching, Rick said. Good. People were always watching, Eli said. They just see better now. The festival grew. Kids sprinted between dock posts like swallowfish. The scholarship winners pinned with paper stars just for the night. Mabel manned the donation table with a referee's stern grace. One at a time, Mabel said to the line. Everyone gets a chance to give. The apprentices ran demos with scrap wood and borrowed tools, teaching how to square a corner, how to sand with the grain. June nudged Eli and pointed toward the water where the reflection of the cafe lights shivered, whole and bright. Looks like it's breathing, June said. So do we, Eli said. Near dusk, Mara lifted a mic and tapped it twice. Neighbors, Mara said. The man washing dishes asked if he could say something. Rick stepped onto the small pallet stage, drying his hands with a towel that didn't bother hiding the soap bubbles. He scanned the crowd, his voice rougher than usual. I've been loud about regulations, Rick said. Loud about timelines. Loud about everything that wasn't the heart of it. I misjudged what mattered. He cleared his throat. Tonight, I'm not here as councilman. I'm here as a man who remembered his grandfather's story about a kitchen that fed this town when money couldn't. You brought that back. If you need a permit signed at dawn, I'll be at the office. If you need trash hauled, I'll lift it. If you need quiet apologies, I've got them. Silence held for a beat, then broke into claps, first small, then rolling. Marion muttered, not unkind. About time. Cal hollered, "Grab another stack, Rick. The sink's not empty." Rick grinned, almost shy, and stepped down. Eli caught his arm. "Thank you," Eli said. Rick nodded. "Thank you for keeping the door open," Rick said. When the fiddler struck a faster tune, June pulled Eli into the swirl. Lanterns swung, voices lifted, and the harbor answered with a low, contented hush. Eli looked out over the crowd, hands full, tables crowded, no one eating alone, and felt Lydia's quiet laughter close by. "We're still building," he said, mostly to her, "and it's working." The cafe was quiet again. The festival lights gone, tables stacked, floor swept to a soft shine. Only the clock ticked and the sea murmured beyond the windows. Eli sat at the counter with a sheet of paper in front of him, pen hovering, the old photo of Lydia propped beside his elbow. He hadn't written to her in years, not like this, not with everything still humming in his chest. He began slowly, his handwriting uneven from tired hands. "Lyd," he wrote, "you planted it. We just kept watering." He paused, watching the ink dry, then continued. "I thought this place would break me. It almost did. The first winter, when the roof gave out, when the cupboards were bare, I kept hearing your voice. You'd say, 'Keep your head down and your heart open.' I tried. Some days I failed, but the ground held, and somehow, so did we." He could hear Marion clattering in the back kitchen, humming the tune she always fell into when she baked before dawn. June's sketchbook sat open near the register, a drawing of the festival still half finished. Lanterns like floating moons, faces smiling, laughter caught in lines of charcoal. Eli touched the corner of the page. "She's got your eye," he wrote. "Sees people before they speak. You'd be proud of how she stands tall now, how she talks to strangers like they're neighbors already." A gust of wind tapped at the door, the bell giving a small, familiar chime. "You should see the town, Lyd," he wrote. "The harbor's busy again. The old mill's reopening as a trade school. Cal's teaching carpentry to kids who never thought they'd hold a tool that could build something. Marion says the scholarships are a miracle. Rick even volunteered for dish duty last week, says it keeps him honest." He smiled faintly as he wrote that line. "It's strange what grace looks like when you stop expecting it to come clean." He leaned back, the pen resting in his fingers. "They gave the cafe heritage status," he added. "Turns out this building once fed Harborview during the Depression. You must have known that. Why else would you pick this spot? You were always 2 steps ahead of time. They say now your idea, feed first, profit later, is going national. The Lydia Initiative, they call it. $74 million to build what we started here, table by table. But every letter they send, every check, every promise still smells like your kitchen, the one we couldn't afford heat in, but where there was always soup enough for one more bowl." He felt the weight of quiet settle around him, but it wasn't heavy. It was full. "If you were here, I'd tell you that you didn't leave me a dream. You left me a duty, and I'm still on it." He signed it simply E and folded the paper. He slipped it into the small tin beneath the counter, where her recipe card still lived. "For when she's listening," he said aloud. Then he stood, looked out the window at the first gray light lifting over the water and whispered, "We're still watering, Lyd. And it's growing." The gym smelled like chalk and floor polish, the kind of scent that always hung around school assemblies. Rows of folding chairs creaked under parents and teachers as the 8th grade students waited their turn on stage. Eli sat near the back, cap in hand, his shirt still marked with flour from the morning's baking. He told Marion he'd be fine, just a proud dad listening, but his hands betrayed him, thumb rubbing a nervous groove along the brim. June stood behind the curtain, clutching a note card she hadn't needed for days. Her name echoed from the microphone. Next up, June Turner, speaking on What We Build Together. She stepped into the light, small and sure. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. My mom used to say love isn't just a feeling, it's a kind of work, June began. Back then, I didn't understand what she meant. I thought love was soft. Turns out, it's got calluses. The room stilled. Even the rustle of programs quieted. When my dad bought a broken cafe for $2, people laughed, she said. It leaked, smelled like salt and rust, and the seagulls thought they owned it. But he saw something else, what my mom started before she passed. She believed food could remind people they belonged somewhere. She glanced at Eli, and he caught her eyes just long enough to see Lydia in them. We swept out feathers and broken glass, and every nail we hammered was a prayer we didn't know we were saying, June continued. At first, we just wanted to survive. But somewhere in all that work, it stopped being about us. It became about everyone who walked through that door. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Teachers, fishermen, shopkeepers, faces Eli recognized from the cafe. June held up one of her sketches, a drawing of the Breakwater Cafe's sign. Feed first, profit later. The marker line shimmered faintly under the gym's lights. That's our sign, she said, and it doesn't just hang on a wall, it hangs in how we live. Because love, when you put it to work, rebuilds everything that's been cracked, flooded, or forgotten. She paused, breath catching, then smiled. My dad says we don't fix people. We just make a table big enough for them to sit at while they heal. I think that's what love does. It builds tables. The applause began softly, Marion clapping first, then Cal, then the entire gym until the sound filled the rafters. Eli stood, eyes bright but steady. When June stepped off stage, she ran straight into his arms, speech notes crumpling between them. You were your mother, he whispered. June shook her head. No, Dad. I was both of you later. As they walked out under the school's flagpole, she tucked her hand into his. Do you think she heard it? Eli looked toward the horizon where the harbor light blinked against the gray. Every word, he said. The tide rolled in quietly, like applause that never had to end. The harbor was still half asleep when Eli turned the key. The old door gave its familiar sigh as he stepped inside, breath clouding faintly in the cool morning air. Light was just beginning to push through the windows, thin and silver, touching the counter where something small caught his eye. A piece of sea glass, green, smoothed by years, sat at the center like a token left behind. He picked it up, turning it between his fingers, the edges cool and perfect. He didn't remember leaving it there. Outside, the gulls started their low chatter, wings flashing pale against the sky. Eli leaned on the counter, the sound of the tide seeping through the cracks like memory. For the first time in months, there was no noise of hammers or chatter of apprentices, no smell of paint or proofing dough, just quiet, living quiet. He set the sea glass down beside the register and whispered, You kept your promise, Lyd. The words filled the space like breath. He looked around the room, the patched floorboards, the mismatched chairs, the chalkboard still carrying June's handwriting from yesterday. Open enough. Always. The sunlight climbed higher, glancing off the heritage plaque near the door, the frame of Lydia's photo above the counter, and the old percolator she'd once claimed made better coffee than any machine. Every object felt like a chapter, every mark on the wood a sentence. Footsteps approached outside, June's, steady and light. She pushed open the door, hair tied up, sketchbook tucked under one arm. You're up early, she said. Didn't sleep much. he replied. Wanted to see the harbor wake up. She noticed the glass tilting her head. Pretty, she said. You find it? Found me, I think. He smiled. Your mom used to collect them. Said they were proof that broken things can still shine. June smiled softly. Then it's a good one to keep. They worked in silence for a while, he brewing coffee, she opening curtains, the cafe coming alive piece by piece. Across the street, fishermen prepped their boats. Somewhere down the pier, Marion's laugh drifted in, sharp and good, the smell of the sea mixed with coffee and soap. Eli poured 2 mugs, handing one to June. You know, he said, I used to think this place was a promise I had to keep for her. But now, he glanced around. Now it feels like she kept it for us. June traced the rim of her cup. It's hers, she said, but it's ours too. Outside, the first edge of sun cleared the horizon, laying gold across the water and spilling through the windows until the whole room glowed. Eli picked up the sea glass again and set it on the windowsill where the light hit it just right, turning the green into something living. He took a slow breath and looked out toward the harbor, the gulls rising, the town waking, the water stretching to forever. We're good, Lyd, he whispered. We're good. The bell over the door chimed as the first customer stepped in, and the cafe filled once more with the sound of morning. If you've walked this whole journey and believe some promises never fade, subscribe and stay close, because grace, like sea glass, keeps finding its way home.